Welcome back to our channel, where we share stories full of wisdom and reflection. Before we dive into today's story, take just 5 seconds to write a salawat upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in the comments below. May it be a means for his intercession on the Day of Judgment. Ameen. And to all our amazing subscribers, thank you for being here. May Allah bless you with abundant health, peace, and endless barakah in your life. The glowing lights of New York City sparkled in the glass window, casting the silhouette of a woman lost in thought. Dr. Ariana Smith sat in her sleek leather chair, gently tapping her slender fingers against the surface of an expensive mahogany desk, trying to find a rhythm, a beat, that could chase away the lingering emptiness in her heart. The only sound in the luxurious office was the low hum of the air conditioner. In front of her, the screen of her high-end computer glowed softly. She had just saved another life. By all worldly standards, she should have felt proud, fulfilled, even. It was, after all, what she had dedicated her life to ever since earning her doctorate. But instead, her heart was heavy. Empty. She reached for a crystal glass of chilled mineral water and took a slow sip. Yet the thirst within her remained, untouched, unquenched. Her eyes drifted to the window. Outside, the world moved with urgency. Cars sped by. Tall men in tailored suits rushed past, glued to their phones, chasing time, chasing ambition, chasing something. Something undefined. Something that felt so familiar. Her life, too, looked perfect on paper. Born into a well-respected family, her father, a renowned medical tycoon, her mother, a socialite who never missed a gala or a high-society charity event. And Ariana? She was the best graduate from a top-tier university, now a highly sought-after surgeon with an income that could buy almost anything. Success? Yes. But happiness? That was the question that lingered. Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her mother. Don't forget the gala dinner tomorrow night. All of your father's colleagues will be there. You have to look perfect, as always. Ariana sighed. Her eyes returned to her reflection in the dark window. Look perfect. Those 2 words had followed her like a shadow her whole life. Regardless of how exhausted she felt, how overwhelmed she became, she was expected to be flawless. Elegant. Intelligent. Composed. And never, ever, a disappointment. Her thoughts wandered to her childhood. Her mother had always pushed her to be the best, in academics, in manners, in social grace. If she got an A, her mother asked, why not an A+? If she won first place, her mother beamed but added, don't let it get to your head. Tomorrow is another challenge. There was no room for weakness. No patience for failure. But now her heart felt like an empty room. She rose slowly from her chair and walked toward the window. The distant skyline seemed to mock her achievements, glimmering but cold. How long had she felt like this? How long had she masked the void with work, with accolades, with luxury? Suddenly, a strange urge bloomed within her. The desire to leave. To escape, even if just for a little while. A name echoed in her mind, Bali. She had read about it before, a land of unmatched beauty. Not just for its beaches and tropical forests, but for its peace, its stillness, its spiritual pull. Without thinking twice, she opened her laptop and searched for the soonest flight. Bali, tomorrow morning. She clicked. Bye. No hesitation. No overthinking. Ariana Smith, known for her meticulous planning, had just made the most impulsive decision of her life. She closed her laptop, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, felt lighter. She didn't know what she was looking for. But she knew she had to go find it. The scent of the ocean greeted her the moment she stepped out of Bali's Ngurah Rai airport. Ariana inhaled deeply, letting the warm, salty breeze kiss her face, so different from the icy winds of New York. This was her first time in a place that didn't feel like it demanded anything from her. No calls. No schedules. No expectations. Just calm. She hesitated as she looked around. Tourists passed by with bright faces, carefree laughter, camera flashes, and floral shirts. They looked light, unburdened. She, however, still carried a weight inside, something unspoken, something unexplainable. A driver held up a sign. "Miss Ariana Smith?" She nodded and approached. "Welcome to Bali, Mississippi. Your villa is ready. The journey will take about an hour." She offered a faint smile and entered the car. As the driver navigated through the streets, Ariana's eyes remained glued to the window. Local markets bustled with life. Vendors called out cheerfully. Children played in narrow alleys. Tourists sipped coconut water on the sidewalks. The farther they drove, the more the city gave way to greenery, lush rice paddies, swaying palm trees, and birds singing in the distance. The car finally arrived at a small, serene villa nestled beside a sea of emerald green rice fields. The staff greeted her warmly and helped with her luggage. Ariana set her suitcase in the corner of the room and walked straight to the balcony. She gazed out in silence. No skyscrapers. No sirens. No endless phone calls. Just peace. Just silence. And she liked it. As the sky turned golden, Ariana sat on a bamboo chair on the balcony, sipping warm tea that a kind staff member had just prepared. The evening breeze gently brushed her face, bringing with it a sense of calm that felt unfamiliar, yet deeply comforting. But just as Ariana was beginning to feel comfortable in the serenity of the countryside, a sound suddenly echoed through the air, melodic, powerful, and hauntingly beautiful. "Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!" She froze. The call to prayer drifted through the wind, softly blending with the gentle sway of the rice fields and the rustling trees. The voice wasn't loud, yet it carried a weight, a peaceful authority that seemed to resonate deep within her. Ariana's heart skipped a beat. She had heard this sound before. Back in New York, there were mosques too, and sometimes she'd catch a faint echo of the adhan. But this time, this was different. The voice touched something inside her, something she couldn't quite name. She closed her eyes, and let it wash over her. A strange calm settled over her heart, more profound than the tea, the breeze, or even the quiet of the rice fields. When the call finally faded, Ariana opened her eyes slowly. The horizon had turned golden-orange, painted with streaks of light like a masterful canvas. "What was that?" she whispered to herself, not out of curiosity, but from a place far deeper, a place that felt like it was just beginning to awaken. That night, sleep didn't come easily. She sat upright on her bed, the lights still on. Her mind replayed the call to prayer over and over again. It was as if the sound had carved a space in her soul, one she hadn't known existed until now. Why had it felt so different this time? Why did that voice bring her peace, real peace, that even years of achievement and luxury had never delivered? She reached for her phone and opened a browser. Her fingers hesitated for a moment before typing. "Islam call to prayer meaning." She scrolled slowly, reading article after article, descriptions of the adhan as not just a summons for prayer, but a reminder of Allah's presence in every moment of life. A gentle pull to pause the rush, to return to something greater than the self. To reflect, to remember. Ariana blinked. Something within her stirred. This wasn't something she could explain or analyze overnight. But one thing was certain, she needed to know more. She set her phone down, laid back on the bed, and let the silence carry her thoughts into the unknown. Bali, at first, had been just another destination. A place to breathe. To disconnect. But now, maybe it was more. Maybe it was the beginning of something. The morning sun broke over the rice fields like a promise. Dew sparkled on the grass like tiny diamonds, glistening in the soft light. Ariana awoke without an alarm, a rare occurrence in her meticulously scheduled New York life. She sat at the edge of the bed and took in the air. It smelled of damp earth, fresh leaves, and frangipani flowers drifting in from the villa's garden. There was something different about this morning. The calm she had felt during the adhan still lingered, like a faint echo in her chest. She changed into a loose white shirt and a pair of linen pants, stepped out onto the balcony, and let her gaze wander across the fields. Farmers had already begun working. Some chatted while carrying hose across their shoulders. Children laughed barefoot, running along the narrow paths between the rice paddies. Birds sang softly above them. The wind moved gently through the coconut trees. Ariana inhaled deeply. There was something in this place that made her feel alive. She decided to walk. Maybe movement would help her understand the strange restlessness inside her. The small dirt path led her through the terraced rice fields. Farmers greeted her with kind smiles. Children waved joyfully. In her world, children were buried in screens. Adults rushed past one another with furrowed brows and tight schedules. Smiles were rare. Silence rarer. But here, these people had so little, yet they seemed so full. Suddenly, her steps halted. At the end of the path stood a small white building, modest but dignified, with a single dome resting gently on its roof. It took her only seconds to realize it was a mosque. She stood there, quietly watching it. Something about the structure pulled her in, an invisible thread tugging at her heart. She didn't know why, but she wanted to step closer. And then the sound returned. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! The dawn adhan. This time, the voice rose from the misty fields with a softness that wrapped around her soul. She didn't understand the words. But she understood the feeling. It was like someone had found the hollow space in her chest and gently filled it with light. The mosque doors opened. A few people entered, elderly men in sarongs and white caps, a few young men with clean, humble faces. No designer suits. No urgent strides. Just stillness. Peace. Ariana swallowed hard. She felt her heart thudding. She wanted to walk in, but her feet stayed rooted. Doubt crept in. What if I don't belong there? What if I offend someone? What if they think I'm just a tourist intruding into something sacred? After a few long minutes, she turned and continued walking, yet her mind lingered behind, inside that little mosque with its glowing silence. That afternoon, Ariana made up her mind. She needed answers. She opened her phone and searched for the nearest bookstore in Ubud. Maybe a book could explain what her heart was feeling. She didn't hesitate. She opened a ride-hailing app and ordered a motorbike taxi. Minutes later, a young man arrived, wearing a green jacket and a black helmet. He smiled kindly. "Miss Ariana Smith?" She nodded. "Yes, that's me." Carefully, she climbed onto the back of the bike. As they drove through the narrow streets lined with art shops and temples, the man broke the silence. "First time in Bali, miss?" Ariana nodded. "Yes. Just 2 days so far." "Welcome to Ubud," he said warmly. "It's a good place to find peace." Ariana paused. There was something in his voice. Something calm, confident, and sincere. Like he truly meant what he said, not just a driver making conversation. "May I ask your name?" she said softly. "Ahmad," he replied, smiling. "I'm from Java," Ahmad said with a soft smile. "But I've lived in Bali for some time now." Ariana glanced at him and finally spoke. Maybe it's strange to say this, but something happened last night. I don't know what it was, but it felt different from anything I've ever experienced before." Ahmad nodded slowly, his eyes focused on the road ahead. "That feeling, that's what I once felt too," he replied gently. "When your heart is searching for something, sometimes Allah gives you signs in the most unexpected ways." His words silenced Ariana. She sat still, reflecting deeply. Something about what he said stirred her soul. After a pause, Ahmad continued, his voice quieter this time. "To be honest, I didn't understand much at first either. I was born into a Muslim family, but I only started truly learning about Islam when I joined a pesantren. That's when I realized, Islam is more than a religion. It's a complete way of life. And many people, they find peace once they begin to understand it." Ariana stared at the back of his helmet, her eyes filled with curiosity. Something inside her whispered, "Keep going. Don't stop now." "I think I want to learn more," she murmured. Ahmad glanced back briefly and smiled. "If you'd like, I can recommend a few good books about Islam for beginners." There's a bookstore in the center of Ubud. For the first time on her trip, Ariana felt something shift. This wasn't just a vacation anymore. This journey was turning into something much deeper. The bookstore in Ubud was small but cozy, with shelves made of aged wood filled with books of every genre. The aroma of old paper mixed with fresh coffee filled the air, wrapping the space in comfort. Ariana stepped inside, her curiosity sharper than ever. Ahmad followed quietly and led her to a quiet corner where a few shelves were dedicated to Islamic literature. Without saying much, he picked up a book and handed it to her. The title read, Islam, an Introduction. Ariana gently held the book in her hands. The soft cover, the weight of it, it felt meaningful somehow. She didn't say anything for a long moment. This one's a good start, Ahmad said quietly. It's simple, not too heavy. But it answers a lot of the basic questions. Ariana opened the first page. Her eyes landed on the opening sentence. Islam is not just a religion, but a way of life, a guide that brings humanity to balance between this world and the next. She stared at the words. The world and the next. Her entire life had been about this world. Career. Wealth. Recognition. Success. But what about the next? She had never really thought about that before. Ahmad pulled another book from the shelf. If you're really curious, this one might help too. It's an English translation of the Qur'an, with some commentary. He handed her the book. Its cover was dark blue, adorned with gold Arabic calligraphy. The Qur'an, she whispered softly. Just saying the name stirred something in her. Something weighty. Something sacred. Can I even read this? She asked hesitantly. Ahmad smiled. Of course. The Qur'an is for everyone, not just Muslims. Anyone who seeks truth has the right to read it. Ariana carefully took the Qur'an into her hands. She didn't open it yet. She just held it close. It felt like peace. Something beautiful. Something different. Something she had unknowingly been searching for. Later that day, Ariana asked Ahmad to take her to the traditional market. She wanted to experience life as the locals did. They drove through narrow village roads, passing temples, rice paddies, and small shops. The morning air was crisp, filled with the scent of incense and spices. Ariana looked around, fascinated by the colors and energy of the market street. But as they neared the entrance, everything changed in a flash. From a small alleyway, two men in masks suddenly appeared. One of them lunged forward and yanked Ariana's bag off her shoulder violently. She screamed. Hey! Stop! She cried, but they were already gone. Panic consumed her. Her bag was gone, her phone, her passport, her money, everything. Everything she had that connected her to her old life, vanished. What should she do? She looked around desperately. People began to gather, trying to comfort her, but she felt utterly lost. Then, in the middle of her fear, only one name came to mind. Ahmad. The only person she knew here. The only one she could trust. With trembling hands, she borrowed a phone from a kind passerby and dialed Ahmad's number, the one she had memorized just in case. Seconds passed like an eternity. And then, she heard his voice. Ariana? What happened? Where are you? Her voice cracked, her body shaking. I need help. Minutes later, Ariana sat in a small roadside shop, holding a glass of water that remained untouched. Her lips trembled. Her world had been turned upside down. How could everything disappear in an instant? She had nothing now. No money. No ID. No flight ticket. No way to contact her family. Just hours ago, she had been a successful doctor from New York. Now, she was alone, shaken, and vulnerable in a foreign land. Her eyes stared blankly down the quiet street. And then, a familiar sound. The gentle purr of a motorbike. Ahmad. He pulled over quickly, spotted her instantly, and rushed to her side. Dropping to a crouch, he looked into her eyes with concern. Ariana, are you all right? She looked up at him, her face pale, her eyes filled with tears. I lost everything, she stammered. My bag, my passport. I don't know what to do. I have no money, no phone. I'm scared. Ahmad gave a gentle smile, calm, reassuring. Don't worry, he said softly. You're not alone. I'll take you to a place where you can rest. A place of peace. No one will ask questions. Without hesitation, Ariana stood and followed him. The ride felt longer this time. She held tightly onto the back of his jacket, not because of the wind, but because, for the first time in her life, she felt completely vulnerable. The motorbike stopped in front of a humble building. A simple mosque. It wasn't large, but it radiated serenity. The gates were open, revealing a spacious courtyard shaded by tall trees. The main structure was white, with clean lines and calm presence. Ariana stared, her eyes wide with wonder. A mosque, she whispered. Ahmad parked the bike, turned off the engine, and faced her. You can stay here, he said. There's a guest room in the back. It's meant for travelers. No one will judge you. You'll be safe here. He looked at her gently. Would you like to come in? Ariana didn't answer immediately. She just stood there, heart racing, breath shallow, as if standing on the edge of something she had never dared to imagine. But deep down she knew. She was ready to step forward. I want to go in, Ariana said softly, her voice trembling. Ahmad nodded gently. Without another word, she followed him. As Ariana stepped across the threshold of the mosque, something shifted inside her. The air felt cooler, more serene. The polished marble floor beneath her feet sent a quiet chill up her spine. But it wasn't discomfort, it was awe. In the far corner of the prayer hall, a few women were kneeling in stillness. Their expressions were serene, unburdened. They weren't distracted or restless. It was as if the world outside didn't exist. Ariana stood in the middle of the room, letting the silence embrace her. There was no sound, except for the hum of the breeze and the soft chirping of crickets in the distance. She had spent her entire life surrounded by ambition, pressure, expectations. But here she saw something else, something pure. People who had nothing to gain were helping her, comforting her, asking for nothing in return. In her world, every act of kindness had a price. But here, it was given freely. Later that night, Ariana lay on a simple bed in a small guest room behind the mosque. The wooden ceiling above her creaked gently with the wind. The events of the day replayed vividly in her mind: the robbery, Ahmed's unwavering help, the stillness of the mosque. And then, something tugged at her heart again. She sat up, reached for the translated Qur'an Ahmad had given her at the bookstore, and slowly flipped through the pages. Her eyes fell on a verse. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. Surah Ash-Shar 94:6, the words hit her like a wave. She whispered them aloud. In hardship, there is ease. Ariana leaned back on her pillow. For the first time in years, she felt unafraid. For the first time, she didn't fear sleeping alone. She let the words carry her into sleep. She woke before dawn. At first, she didn't know why, but then she heard it again. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! The dawn adhan. It floated gently through the speaker of the mosque, like the very first light of day easing into the darkness. It entered her heart not like a sound, but like a presence. She sat up in bed, letting the call fill her room. Her heart was lighter. Her mind calm. Something deep within her had begun to melt, like a frozen part of her soul was slowly being warmed by this divine light. From her window, she saw the women in the mosque leaving their rooms, making their way quietly to the ablution area. They washed their faces and hands with grace and devotion, then entered the prayer hall. Ariana watched from a distance, captivated. She didn't understand everything, but she understood the feeling. Peace. She found herself drawn closer. Stepping quietly toward the door of the prayer area, she peeked inside. The women had begun their prayer. They bowed. They prostrated. Ariana felt goosebumps. There was something sacred about the way they submitted. Something so beautiful, so full of humility. When the prayer ended, she sat outside the mosque in the open courtyard, feeling the cool breeze against her skin. Her heart was still racing with emotion. She had seen something that stirred her soul, but she didn't yet have words for it. Moments later, a gentle-looking woman with kind eyes approached her. "Good morning, dear," the woman said with a warm smile. "You must be our guest?" Ariana nodded. "Yes. I'm Ariana." The woman sat beside her on the stone bench, her presence calming. "My name is Sidi," she said. "I've lived here many years. I've seen many people come through these doors, people searching for something." She paused, then gently placed her hand over Ariana's. "Have you been searching, my dear?" Ariana hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I think yes. For a long time. I've tried to fill the emptiness with everything, success, money, recognition, but none of it worked." Sidi smiled softly, her eyes full of wisdom. "Sometimes, when the heart is ready, Allah knocks. All we need to do is listen." Ariana looked at her hands, now trembling slightly. A strange sensation was spreading through her chest, familiar yet foreign. Is this that moment?" she asked in almost a whisper. Sidi nodded, her eyes kind. "Yes, my dear. When the heart softens, and something inside you feels pulled toward the truth, that is Hidayah. A gift from Allah." Tears welled up in Ariana's eyes. "I'm scared," she confessed. "If I follow this feeling, I don't know how my life will change. What will happen to my job, my family, my reputation? I don't know if I'm strong enough." Sidi gently squeezed her hand. "The journey toward light is never without obstacles. But remember, every small step toward the truth is protected. You don't have to rush. Just listen to your heart. Peace doesn't lie, it will guide you." Ariana closed her eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time, she didn't feel pulled back to her old life. That night, after sharing a simple dinner with the women of the mosque, Ariana sat alone on the porch. The sky above was glittering with stars, and the air was cooler than usual. Inside the mosque, the prayer for Isha had begun. She watched quietly. Their heads bowed, their hearts humbled. Ariana whispered to herself, "What are they feeling, and why do I want to feel it too?" Beside her, Sidi returned, holding a small Qur'an, worn with time, but still beautiful. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. Ariana looked at her, unsure. I want to understand. I want to know what this is. What I've been feeling." Sidi opened the book and pointed to a verse. "Whoever Allah guides, there is no one who can misguide them." Surah Az-Zumar, 39:23, Ariana read the words. And this time, she didn't just read them. She felt them. Ever since the first adhan in the rice fields, ever since she stepped into the mosque, something had been guiding her here. "I think," she said slowly, "this is the first time in my life I'm not afraid to believe in something bigger than myself." Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Sidi placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "That is Hidayah, my dear. When Allah calls, our only task is to answer." Ariana looked up at the sky. The stars seemed to shimmer brighter now. For the first time, she felt ready. Ready to surrender. Ready to begin. Indeed, those who have believed, and those whose hearts are assured by the remembrance of Allah. Unquestionably, by the remembrance of Allah hearts are assured. Surah Ar-Ra'd, 13:28, they stood in silent devotion, bowing, prostrating, surrendering fully. Ariana watched them from a distance, captivated. Her gaze lingered on a little girl beside her mother. Her movements were clumsy, uncoordinated, yet filled with sincerity. She mirrored her mother's prayer with childlike devotion. Ariana smiled softly. There was something so pure in it. So whole. From the moment she first stepped into this mosque, she had been nothing more than an observer, standing at the edge of something she didn't fully understand. But now something inside her was moving. For the first time, she wasn't just watching. She was being pulled in. Slowly, she mimicked the others. Bowing, lowering herself. And then, gently, she let her forehead touch the cool prayer mat in prostration. The moment her forehead rested on the ground, something inside her cracked open. Tears poured from her eyes. Her body shook with sobs. She didn't know why. She couldn't explain it. But for the first time in her life, she felt free. It wasn't about rituals. It wasn't about rules. It was release. Ahmad stood silently nearby, giving her space. He didn't speak. He didn't interfere. This moment belonged to her. When Ariana finally lifted her head, her face was soaked with tears. What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Ahmad smiled gently. "This is submission, Ariana. When we prostrate, we let go of everything. No one can force it. But if it brings peace, let your heart lead the way." Ariana looked at him. Then, quietly, she bowed again. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was surrender. The days that followed passed slowly, softly, in the embrace of the mosque. Ariana began to wake before dawn, anticipating the adhan like a sacred whisper. She learned the rhythm of prayer. She joined the women in quiet worship. And in the afternoons she began helping at the small community clinic beside the mosque, treating feverish children, caring for elderly villagers. It was humble. Quiet. Nothing like her New York life. But for once, she wasn't chasing anything. She was living. One evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the mosque in golden light, Ahmad sat beside her on the porch. "You've changed," he said softly. Ariana nodded. "I've found something I never thought I was missing. But your family, they don't know yet, do they?" Ariana looked down. "No. I'm scared. I don't know how to tell them." Ahmad was silent for a while. Then he said, "The truth isn't always easy, Ariana. But they're your family. You don't have to make them understand everything right away. Just let them know you're okay." That night, her hands trembled as she dialed the number. Her mother's voice answered on the third ring. "Ariana? Where are you? What's going on? You disappeared, your phone was off. We've been worried sick." Ariana closed her eyes, her throat tight. "I'm still in Bali, Ma." Her mother paused. "When are you coming home?" Ariana looked at the sky. It was filled with stars, silent witnesses to this moment. "I need to tell you something," she said. A heavy silence followed. I've become a Muslim." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "What did you say?" I said, "I've become a Muslim. Ma, no one forced me. No one pressured me. I felt something here, something real." Her mother's voice cracked. "You don't know what you're doing. You've been brainwashed." "No, Ma. I've finally found peace." Ariana's voice trembled, but she didn't back down. "I know this is hard to accept. I know I'm far from everything you understand. But this is the first time I feel alive. And I need you to hear me, not just with fear, but with love." There was only silence on the other end. A silence filled with confusion, fear, heartbreak. But also, the space for something new. A beginning. That night, Ariana sat in her room, holding the same Qur'an that had become her companion these past weeks. Rain tapped gently on the windows. The wind moved softly through the trees. She found a verse. "Indeed, Allah guides whom He wills." Surah Al-Qasis, 28:56, and in that moment she no longer felt alone. The next morning, Ahmad found her standing at the edge of the mosque garden, the soft light of dawn bathing her face. "You're quiet," he said. She turned to him. "I'm ready." "Ready?" he asked, his voice filled with hope. "I want to become a Muslim." Ahmad smiled, his eyes lighting up. Without a word, he nodded and motioned to Budi, who was nearby. "We'll go see Ustaz," he said. "He will guide you." Inside the prayer hall, a gentle elderly man welcomed her. The Ustaz looked at her with warmth and reassurance. "You're not expected to know everything, Ariana," he said. "Islam is a journey. What matters most is your sincerity." She nodded slowly. "I'm ready," she said again. The Ustaz began. "Repeat after me. I bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship except Allah. And I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Her lips trembled. Her voice cracked. But she said the words. And the moment she finished, her tears came again. Not out of fear. Not out of loss. But because something had finally filled the void she'd carried all her life. Welcome to Islam, Sister Ariana, the Ustaz said warmly. You're now part of a family that spans the globe. She smiled through her tears. She had chased happiness in the corridors of hospitals, in city lights, in the applause of powerful rooms. But it was here, in a quiet village in Bali, barefoot in a mosque, surrounded by strangers turned family, that she found it. She was no longer chasing. She had found peace. That night, under the stars, she pressed call on her phone again. Her mother answered. Ariana, where are you? She took a deep breath. I'm still me, Ma. I just finally found who I really am. The silence that followed was long. But in Ariana's heart, there was no longer fear. Only peace. You destroyed everything we've built. Her mother's voice thundered through the phone. Tears welled up in Ariana's eyes, her voice shaking. I didn't betray you, Mama. She swallowed hard. I just found peace. Her mother laughed bitterly. Peace? She echoed with disbelief. Was the life we gave you not enough? The home, the opportunities, the name? I know this is hard to accept. But I didn't make this decision carelessly. Ariana pleaded. I thought deeply. I searched, and I found something real. There was a pause. A long, cold silence. And then her mother's voice came, colder than before. If you still choose this, then you are no longer part of this family. Ariana's heart stopped. Her hands began to tremble. Her tears spilled freely now, uncontrollably. Mama, please, she sobbed. Don't say that. I'm still your daughter. But the call ended. Ariana stared at the screen in disbelief, the silence on the other end now echoing louder than any voice. She collapsed into her hands, her body shaking with sobs that couldn't be held back anymore. Everything was gone. Her family. Her name. Her identity. All stripped away by one decision, the decision to seek the truth. The stars above remained unmoved, twinkling silently as Ariana sat alone on the balcony of the villa, her tears staining her cheeks. Her mother's words haunted her. You are no longer part of this family. The pain was unbearable. But even through the grief, one thing remained: peace. In the middle of loss, Ariana could still feel the quiet strength of her faith. A light that refused to go out. She lifted her face to the night sky and whispered through her tears, Ya Allah, guide me. The next morning, she walked to the mosque with steadier steps, even though her heart still ached. Waiting at the door was Mrs. City. The moment she saw Ariana's pale face and swollen eyes, she said nothing. She simply opened her arms. Ariana fell into them. She cried again, silently this time, more out of exhaustion than heartbreak. When she lifted her head, Mrs. City whispered softly, This is only the beginning. You cannot change hearts, but you can show yours. And always keep praying for them. Ariana nodded. She didn't know when, or if, her family would ever accept her. But she knew she had to keep going. The days passed quietly. Ariana found her rhythm. She began working more actively in the mosque's small clinic, treating fevers, soothing worried mothers, tending to elderly villagers. The medicine cabinet was humble. Supplies were limited. But there was love in every bandage she applied, every gentle word she spoke. This wasn't the world she once knew. But it was the world her heart had been searching for. One morning, after finishing her clinic rounds, she stepped outside into the golden sunlight. The chirping of birds and distant adhan blended like a symphony of peace. And beside her, once again, was Ahmad. The man who had been there through every storm. He approached with 2 cups of warm tea and sat beside her. For you, he said quietly. Ariana smiled softly, accepting the cup. They sat in silence for a while. You look calmer, Ahmad said finally. I've started to understand. Ariana replied. I know my family may never accept my choice. But I can't let that destroy me. This peace I've found, it's real. Ahmad nodded. That's because Allah is guiding you. And once He guides you, nothing else matters. Ariana looked at him. And for the first time, she saw something in his gaze that hadn't been there before. A warmth. A depth. A softness. Something she had been blind to, until now. She didn't know when her feelings had begun to shift. Maybe it was the day he helped her after the robbery. Maybe it was how patiently he answered her questions. Maybe it was when she saw him pray, with sincerity so deep it moved her. Whatever it was, it had grown. She didn't dare speak it. Ahmad had become her guide, her brother in faith. How could she risk that? But before she could silence the thought, Ahmad turned to her. I don't know how to say this properly, he said, but I want to propose to you. Ariana's heart froze. What did you say? She asked, barely above a whisper. I've watched you transform, he said gently. I've seen you seek the truth with a heart full of sincerity. Ariana, I love you. And I want to walk this path with you. Tears streamed down Ariana's cheeks. She had never felt more overwhelmed. More certain. I accept your proposal, she whispered. The sea breeze cooled the courtyard like a soft blessing from above. Nature itself seemed to celebrate. From the porch, Mrs. City smiled knowingly. Marriage is worship, she said. It's not just about love, it's about guiding one another to goodness. I want a simple marriage, Ahmad said. No need for extravagance. Only the blessings of Allah. Ariana nodded. That's all I want too. Their hearts were at peace. But joy is often tested. The next day, while Ariana was tending to a patient, her phone rang. She froze. The caller ID, mother. Her breath caught. She stepped out and answered. There was no anger in her mother's voice this time. Only exhaustion. And something softer. I've booked you a ticket back to New York, she said. Come home. Just for a while. Ariana hesitated. She looked at Ahmad. He gave a quiet, steady nod. I'll wait for you. She turned away, her heart torn but firm. She needed to see them. To look them in the eyes. Not to be swayed, but to show them she was still Ariana. The flight from Bali to New York felt like a lifetime. Not because of the hours, but because of what waited on the other side. The sky outside the window was a storm of emotion. Clouds shifted, winds pulled, but Ariana sat still. In her bag was a small Qur'an. In her chest, a heart full of conviction. She didn't know what her family would say. But she knew one thing for certain, she would never turn back. Because in the dark, she had found light. And no matter what awaited her in New York, she would carry that light with her. Always. I don't know if my family will ever accept me again, Ariana whispered, tears pooling in her eyes, but I believe you won't leave me. The cold wind of New York struck her face as she stepped out of the airport. The city that once felt like home now felt like a stranger. Every time she used to return, a private driver would greet her at the gate. Comfort. Luxury. Belonging. But now, there was no one. She hailed a taxi alone. The familiar streets passed by the window, but everything felt distant, like a dream she no longer belonged to. Her heart pounded faster as the car neared her childhood home. It was still majestic. Still pristine. White pillars stood tall at the entrance, like a palace untouched by time. But this time, she felt like an intruder. She knocked. The door opened. Her mother stood there, expressionless. Cold. You came, she said flatly. Ariana swallowed hard. Her mother's eyes scanned her from head to toe, as if searching for the daughter she once knew beneath the woman who now wore a simple hijab. She's still alive, her mother finally said, referring to Ariana's father. But I doubt he'll be happy to see you. I just want to make sure he's okay. Ariana replied gently. With a reluctant step aside, her mother let her in. Inside, nothing had changed, but Ariana had. The grand chandelier. The velvet drapes. The scent of imported candles. All of it felt foreign now. Upstairs, her father lay in bed, pale, frail, a four-line attached to his arm. His once sharp eyes met hers. And in them wasn't relief. It was betrayal. "What are you doing here?" His voice was weak, yet filled with pain. Ariana stood silently, her heart shaking. "I came to see you, Papa." He laughed bitterly. "You left. You abandoned everything we built. You betrayed the family." "And for what?" "I found peace." His eyes narrowed. "You destroyed our name for your so-called peace." "No, Papa," she said softly. "I finally found who I really am." But he turned away. And in that moment she knew the door had closed. She walked out step by step. Down the same marble stairs she once ran down as a child. Past the photos on the wall, the echoes of laughter long gone. Away from a house that no longer felt like home. At the airport, she sat alone at the gate. No luggage except her small carry-on. No purpose to stay. Her family had rejected her. But as she looked out at the vast sky, she remembered the verse that had carried her through her darkest nights. Verily, with hardship comes ease. Tears streamed down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of trust. She may have lost her worldly family, but she had never been alone. Because Allah was always with her. And back in Bali, someone was waiting. The plane landed in Denpasar under a soft blue sky. The sunlight broke through the clouds gently, warming her face. But her heart was heavy. She rolled her suitcase out of Terminal K, every step weighed with sorrow. And then, she saw him. Ahmad. Without a word, he walked up, gently took the suitcase from her trembling hand, and whispered, "Let's go home." Home. The word had never sounded so beautiful. As the wind rushed past her face on the back of Ahmad's motorbike, her tears dried. They weren't signs of weakness. They were remnants of growth. They reached the mosque. As soon as she stepped into the courtyard, peace enveloped her once more. Mrs. City was waiting on the terrace. The moment she saw Ariana, she embraced her tightly. "My child, you've come home," she whispered. Ariana broke down in her arms. That night, under a sky full of stars, Ariana sat quietly beside Ahmad. "How did it go?" he asked gently. "They didn't accept me," she whispered. "My father wouldn't even look at me." Ahmad didn't say much. Just held her pain in silence. Then he reminded her softly, "Allah never gives a burden greater than one can bear." She nodded slowly, her heart still aching. But in that ache was clarity. She wasn't alone. Even when the world turned away, Allah had never left her. And deep in her heart, one truth had begun to shine: she wanted to live this life with him. A few weeks later, in a small, peaceful ceremony at the Abad Mosque, Ariana and Ahmad were married. There were no chandeliers. No luxury decor. Just soft prayers. Warm smiles. The embrace of a new family who had accepted her completely. Ariana wore a simple white gamis. Ahmad, a clean white cocoa shirt. When they said the ijab Kabul, tears streamed down Ariana's cheeks. This wasn't just a wedding. This was the start of a new life. A life built not on status or perfection, but on love, faith, and sincerity. When Ahmad gently held her hand, Ariana felt it in her soul. This was home. Not the city lights of Manhattan. Not the grand halls of her childhood home. But here, in the heart of someone who loved her for the sake of Allah. And under the starlit skies of Bali, Ariana smiled. She had found the happiness she had once chased in all the wrong places. Not in the world's applause, but in the quiet, powerful peace that only Allah can give. Welcome, dear friends. Today, we're about to step into an extraordinary story, one filled with powerful emotional debates and deep reflections that touch the heart and challenge the mind. This is the story of a unique encounter between a skeptical philosophy professor and a 7-year-old Muslim girl with unshakable faith. The story takes place in Colombia, where a well-known intellectual event becomes the backdrop of a debate no one expected. Dr. Everardo Vargas, a renowned professor of philosophy, is infamous for his harsh critiques of religion. For decades he has studied and taught about the concept of God, existentialism, and rationalism. In many of his lectures, he boldly questions the existence of God and dismisses the ideas of heaven and hell as mere myths, fabricated to instill fear in the human heart. His views are sharp, academic, and often unsettling to those with religious beliefs. In the same city lives Milena Rodriguez, a bright 7-year-old Muslim girl. Born to a devout family, her father a Colombian convert to Islam, and her mother of Arab descent, Milena has grown up surrounded by Islamic teachings and values. Despite her young age, Milena possesses a remarkable intellect and a heart firmly anchored in her faith. One day, during an open seminar held at the university where Dr. Everardo lectures, something completely unexpected occurred. The seminar, titled, "The Existence of Heaven and Hell in Modern Philosophy," began as usual. Intellectuals, students, and religious figures debated fervently, each defending their perspective. The air was thick with complex ideas and academic tension. But suddenly, everything changed. From the back of the hall, a small child with a curious face raised her hand. The crowd turned, astonished. Who was this child? What was she doing in a forum meant for adults? Dr. Everardo looked at her with amused skepticism, assuming this was just a child with a question fueled by childish wonder. With a dismissive smile, he invited her to speak. Milena rose to her feet. Standing before a room full of adults, her voice was soft, but her presence commanded attention. With calm confidence, she asked, "Dr. Everardo, may I ask you something? Why are you so sure that heaven doesn't exist?" The entire room fell silent. All eyes turned to the professor, waiting for his response. Dr. Everardo leaned forward slightly and replied with certainty, "Because there is no scientific evidence that proves the existence of heaven. It's a man-made concept, born out of fear of death. I've studied the theories of science, philosophy, even religion, and none have provided proof that convinces me." Milena didn't flinch. She simply asked, "Then can you prove to me that heaven doesn't exist?" The room grew even quieter. The attendees leaned in, suddenly far more interested than before. This child wasn't just asking random questions, she was steering the conversation in a way no one anticipated. Dr. Everardo narrowed his eyes slightly. "Of course, I can't prove the non-existence of something that doesn't have empirical evidence. But the burden of proof lies on the one who claims something exists. If you say heaven is real, then it's your responsibility to prove it." Milena smiled gently. There was no fear or nervousness in her expression, only calm resolve. She looked straight at him and said, "I will prove it, but on one condition. You must listen not just with your mind, but with your heart." A murmur spread through the audience. Everyone now sat upright, their curiosity ignited. Could a 7-year-old girl really challenge a seasoned professor in a philosophical debate? Dr. Everardo gave a faint smile. But this time, it wasn't the sarcastic kind. Something had changed in his demeanor. He no longer looked at Milena as a mere child. Her calm poise, her clarity of thought, it was something rare, something even his years of academic experience hadn't prepared him for. "All right," he said. "I'm listening. Show me your proof." Milena nodded and took a deep breath. Then, with the same calm tone, she asked, "Doctor, before I show you proof of heaven, may I ask you one more thing? Do you believe love exists?" The professor raised an eyebrow. It was a simple question, but he hesitated for a moment before responding. "Of course, love exists. We feel it. Even if we can't see it." Milena's smile widened slightly. "So you believe in something you cannot see?" Whispers rippled through the audience. People began to understand where she was going with this. Dr. Eberardo, sensing the trap, tried to clarify. Love can be proven through actions. We see people make sacrifices, show affection. We may not see love itself, but its effects are observable. Milena nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly what I'm saying. We may not see heaven with our eyes, but we can see the effects of believing in it. Look at how belief in heaven inspires people to do good, to be patient, kind, and responsible. Isn't that a form of evidence too? The room fell silent once more. Some students who were casually observing before now leaned forward, their eyes glued to the stage. The debate had taken a profound turn. Dr. Eberardo chuckled softly and shook his head. That's just your personal belief, Milena. People do good because of moral values, not necessarily because they believe in heaven. If heaven were real, there should be direct, undeniable evidence, something tangible. Milena didn't rush to respond. She paused, thinking carefully before speaking. Then, her eyes met the professor's once again, and she asked, Doctor, have you ever had a dream? The professor looked slightly puzzled by the sudden change in topic. Still, he answered, Yes, of course. Everyone has dreams. And when you dream, Milena continued, do you feel that what's happening in your dream is real? Dr. Eberardo raised his eyebrows thoughtfully. Sometimes, yes. Some dreams feel so real that when I wake up, it takes a moment to realize they weren't real. Milena smiled softly. What if this life we're living right now is just like a dream, and the afterlife is when we truly wake up and see the real reality? Suddenly, the room fell into an eerie silence. It was so quiet that even the sound of breathing seemed louder. Several students glanced at one another, visibly affected, as if they had just heard something they had never considered before. Dr. Eberardo now looked at Milena more seriously. He didn't respond right away. Her words, simple as they were, carried a weight that made even a seasoned philosopher pause. But as a man of academia, he didn't want to appear intellectually defeated by a child, no matter how compelling her words were. Taking a deep breath, he finally replied, That's just a theory, Milena. One that cannot be proven. We can't say for certain whether life after death truly exists. Without missing a beat, Milena answered. And you can't prove that it doesn't. A wave of soft murmurs spread across the room. Heads nodded. One male student sitting at the front raised his hand and added, Professor, I think Milena has a point. Just because something can't be proven doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Look at science. Centuries ago, people couldn't see bacteria. That didn't mean they weren't real. Other students began whispering, their faces now lit with deep thought. The seminar had clearly taken a turn from mere academic theory to something more profound. One skeptical student, however, voiced a common doubt. If heaven is a place full of happiness and pleasure, as described in the scriptures, then why can't we see it? Why doesn't God just show it to us? Milena turned to him with gentle eyes. Doctor, she said, still addressing Dr. Eberardo, do you know what happens if someone brings a piece of expensive, delicious meat into a pen full of pigs? Dr. Eberardo frowned, puzzled by the odd question. Still, he answered, Of course. The pigs would immediately eat it. Milena nodded. Exactly. No matter how fine or costly the meat is, the pig sees it only as food. Nothing more. Just like that, humans who only live for this world, who focus solely on material things, they're like the pig. They can't recognize something as profound as heaven because they don't know how to see it. God doesn't show us heaven, because this life is a test. We will only see heaven if we're ready to see it. Once again, the room went completely silent. The audience sat motionless, some stunned by the depth of this little girl's answer. Dr. Eberardo, too, said nothing for a moment. He seemed caught off guard, speechless even. Around him, several students looked visibly shaken. Those who had entered the seminar with skeptical minds now sat quietly, as though rethinking their entire worldview. In the middle row, a woman in her 20s bowed her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She had always called herself an agnostic, unsure of whether God existed, but something about Milena's words had struck her deeply, piercing straight into her heart. In a faint whisper, she said to herself, "How can a child this young speak as if she knows the secret of life?" Dr. Eberardo took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on Milena. "You are a smart child," he admitted, his voice softer now. "I didn't expect you to give such thoughtful answers." Milena smiled humbly. "I'm not smart, doctor. I just believe." The debate was far from over. Although Dr. Eberardo had been intellectually challenged, he wasn't ready to give up. He still had questions, doubts, but for the first time in his life, he felt uncertain about the beliefs he had fiercely defended all these years. The atmosphere in the room was unlike anything anyone had experienced before. No one dared to speak. It was as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for the next exchange. The students looked around at one another, some stunned, others deep in thought, as if Milena's words were still echoing in their minds. Dr. Eberardo leaned back in his chair. His gaze, once sharp and firm, was now contemplative. He was beginning to realize that this conversation wasn't just about philosophy or academic logic. It was about faith. A subject he had ignored or dismissed for so long. But as a scholar, he wasn't ready to surrender so easily. "Milena," he said gently, "your arguments are interesting, very interesting. But there's still something that troubles me. Something that makes it hard for me to believe. If heaven truly exists, if God is truly just, why is this world filled with suffering? Why does God allow so much injustice, so much pain? If heaven is a place of perfect justice, why does this world feel so unfair?" Milena looked at him with eyes full of understanding. She could tell that this wasn't just a question from the mind, but from the heart. She took a deep breath and replied, "Doctor, you are a professor of philosophy. You must understand the purpose of exams, don't you?" "Of course," he nodded. "Exams are used to measure someone's ability." Milena smiled gently. "Then why do you still question why this world is hard? Life is a test, doctor. Every trial, every moment of hardship, every injustice, it's part of the test. A test to see who continues to do good, even when life is difficult. And who gives up." The room once again sank into silence. Dr. Eberardo frowned thoughtfully. "But not everyone can pass the test. Some people suffer their entire lives, from the moment they're born until the day they die. Is that really fair?" Milena looked at him deeply. "Doctor, when a professor sets an exam, does he give the same test to every student?" Dr. Eberardo paused, then slowly shook his head. "No. The test is usually given according to each student's level of understanding." Milena's smile returned. "Exactly. That's how God tests us too. Every person is given a test that matches their ability. Those who are tested the most, it doesn't mean they're being punished. It may mean they are the strongest of all. Because God knows," Milena continued gently, "that those people are strong enough to pass the test. And after the test ends, there is a reward waiting, called heaven." A few students slowly nodded their heads. Milena's logic was so simple, yet so undeniably powerful. Dr. Eberardo, who had for so long considered suffering as proof that God did not care, now found his heart stirred by a different understanding, one he had never allowed himself to consider before. Still, he wasn't ready to admit that he might have been wrong. A lifetime spent in the world of philosophy, defending logic over faith, made that difficult. He looked at Milena with more intensity now, his voice carrying a sincere doubt. "But what about people who die without ever experiencing happiness in this world?" he asked. "What if, after they die, there's nothing? What if heaven is just an empty hope?" Milena's gaze remained steady, calm, and clear. "Doctor," she said, Do you know how a caterpillar turns into a butterfly? Dr. Eberardo blinked, puzzled. Of course. A caterpillar has to go through the cocoon phase first. Milena smiled warmly. Exactly. And that's how humans are too. This world is our cocoon. A place where we must struggle, survive, and grow. When someone dies, they don't vanish, they transform. Just like a caterpillar, which looks like it dies when it becomes a cocoon, but it's really preparing for a more beautiful life. That life is heaven. The hall fell into a deep stillness. Some students sat frozen, their eyes wide. Others rubbed their faces as if awakening from a long sleep. A few looked down in reflection. One male student, who had been silent throughout the debate, finally raised his hand and said, "Professor, I'm not a religious person, but I feel like this conversation is no longer just about whether heaven exists or not. It's about how we choose to see life." Dr. Eberardo turned to him, curious. "What do you mean?" The student sighed heavily. "I've always felt life was unfair. I was born into a poor family. Getting into college was a struggle. Meanwhile, my rich friends seemed to glide through life with ease. I often felt bitter, even angry at God. But after listening to Milena, maybe the problem wasn't with life itself. Maybe the problem was how I saw it." Milena looked at the young man with kindness. "True justice isn't always visible in this world," she said. "But that doesn't mean justice doesn't exist." Dr. Eberardo slowly wiped his face with his hands. His heart was stirred in ways he hadn't expected. This debate, which he had walked into with full confidence, was turning into something far greater than he had ever imagined. Looking at Milena again, he spoke in a quieter, more vulnerable tone. "You're really something, Milena. I've spent years teaching philosophy, debating with some of the brightest minds, but none of them have made me reflect the way you just did." Milena lowered her head humbly. "I only speak from the heart, Doctor." Dr. Eberardo let out a long sigh. In his heart, he felt like a man who had wandered in darkness for years, and now, suddenly, a small crack of light had appeared. But he wasn't ready to step fully into that light. "Not yet. I need time to think through all this," he said sincerely. Milena nodded with understanding. "It's okay, Doctor. Guidance comes to those who sincerely seek it." The room was silent again. Everyone felt it. Something important had just taken place. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Dr. Eberardo had one final question. A question that had lingered in his heart all along, and he knew this would determine everything. He sat still for a long moment, eyes locked on Milena. The room felt heavy with anticipation, as if every soul inside was holding its breath. Then, finally, he spoke. "All right, Milena. I admit that your arguments are strong. You speak not just with logic, but with something even deeper. But I still have one last question. And I want your honest answer." Milena stood calmly, her small hands gripping the edges of her skirt. "Please, Doctor. I'll try to answer." Dr. Eberardo took a breath and asked, "If God exists, if heaven is real, why are we asked to believe without seeing? Why doesn't God just show us heaven, so everyone will believe?" A murmur passed through the audience. It was the question many had buried inside themselves, the doubt that lived in quiet corners of the heart. Milena gave a slight smile. "Doctor, do you believe that air exists?" Dr. Eberardo frowned. "Of course. We can feel it, even though we can't see it." Milena nodded. "And do you believe love exists?" He was silent for a moment. Then he gave a slow nod. "Yes. Even though it's not something we can measure with numbers." Milena's smile widened. "Exactly. There are so many things we believe in, even though we can't see them. We know air exists because we breathe. We know love exists because we feel it. Then why do we demand to see heaven before believing it exists?" A female student in the front row raised a hand hesitantly. "But Milena, isn't that different? We can feel air and love. But heaven, we can't feel that, can we? Milena turned to her with warmth in her eyes. Are you sure about that? The student blinked. What do you mean? Milena answered gently. When you help someone without expecting anything in return, don't you feel a strange kind of joy? When you do something good, doesn't your heart feel lighter? When you pray with sincerity, don't you feel peace? The girl nodded slowly. Milena continued. That's a small taste of heaven. God gives us glimpses of it here in this world, not through our eyes, but through our hearts. It's not that heaven can't be felt, it's that not everyone knows how to feel it. The room grew still again. Many students looked shaken, minds awakened, hearts stirred. What began as a philosophical seminar had become something far more meaningful. Dr. Everardo leaned back in his chair. Inside him raged a quiet storm. For years he had believed that truth must be tangible, measured, proven. But this child was showing him a truth that was higher than sight, truth that lived in the soul. But Milena, he said, his voice faint, I've spent my entire life reading philosophy, analyzing thousands of arguments. I always believed that faith should be based on evidence. I'm afraid of believing in something that might not be real. Milena looked at him with affection, her eyes filled with understanding. Then she asked gently, Doctor, have you ever flown in a plane? He nodded. Of course. And have you ever entered the cockpit during the flight? He shook his head. No. That area is for pilots only. Milena smiled. But you still believe the pilot is there, right? Dr. Everardo remained silent. He began to understand where Milena was guiding the conversation. She smiled gently. You never saw the pilot directly on the plane, she said, but you still believed he was there, because the plane was flying. In the same way, we can't see God directly, but we can see signs of His presence all around us. She looked upwards slightly as she continued. The sun that rises every morning, the rain that falls in perfect timing, the miracle of life itself, these are all signs that there's a divine pilot who governs everything. Once again, the room fell into silence. The students sat quietly, reflecting on Milena's words. They weren't just hearing them, they were feeling them. Dr. Everardo's chest tightened. He felt like a man who had wandered the desert for years and suddenly stumbled upon a source of water. Yet, even now, he hesitated. Should he drink? Should he believe? He looked at Milena, his eyes full of turmoil. I need time. Milena nodded with understanding. Of course, Doctor. Guidance doesn't come by force. But if you sincerely seek the truth, Allah will show it to you. The students exchanged glances, realizing that this debate wasn't just affecting them, it was deeply touching their professor too. Suddenly, a male student who had remained silent until now stood up, his eyes brimming with tears. Professor, he said softly, may I speak? Dr. Everardo turned to him. Please. The student took a deep breath. I used to be an atheist. My family never spoke about religion. I believed life was only about survival, and when it ended, that was it. The room fell even quieter. Everyone was listening. But one day, he continued, voice trembling, I was in a terrible accident. I almost died. And in that moment, I felt something that logic couldn't explain. It was peace. Since then, I've been searching for the truth. And today, I feel like I've finally found it. He turned toward Milena, emotion in his eyes. Thank you. Your words opened my heart. Milena smiled softly. Alhamdulillah. Dr. Everardo lowered his head, visibly shaken. He was seeing real change unfold before his very eyes. He looked back at Milena and said quietly, I don't know if I'm ready to believe in everything yet, but I do know I can't ignore this. Milena smiled warmly. That's enough for the beginning, Doctor. Every journey starts with a single step. The air in the room had changed. It felt different now, calmer, deeper. Something had shifted. Even though it couldn't be seen, it could be felt. And though the formal debate had ended, a new kind of debate had begun, one within Dr. Eberardo's heart. Still seated, he held his forehead in his hands. His mind spun with thoughts. A 7-year-old girl had just shaken the foundations of a worldview he'd spent decades building. His eyes scanned the room. Some students looked confused. Others were lost in thought. A few were clearly moved. The student who had spoken about his near-death experience sat with his head bowed, seemingly reflecting on something even deeper. Dr. Eberardo drew in a long breath. "Milena," he said gently, "I can't deny that your words have shaken my thoughts. But I still need more time to process all of this." Milena's smile remained soft and patient. "Of course, Doctor. Faith doesn't come all at once. It's a journey, and that journey must begin with a sincere heart." He nodded slowly, his heart still full of questions. How could a child so young speak with such wisdom? How could I, a professor who studied the world's greatest philosophers, feel like a student in front of her? Suddenly, a female student raised her hand. Her voice was hesitant. "Professor, do you still believe that heaven is just a fantasy?" Dr. Eberardo was quiet for a long time. When he finally answered, his voice was different, gentler, humbler. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe I've spent too much time thinking with my head, and forgot to listen with my heart." The room grew still once more. Everyone could sense that this wasn't just a seminar. It was something far deeper, a real search for truth. Milena smiled again. "Doctor, may I ask you one last question?" He nodded. "Please." She looked him in the eye, her gaze steady and sincere. "You've spent your life searching for truth, haven't you?" "Yes," he replied. "Then are you truly sure that truth can only be found in books and theories?" He froze. It was such a simple question. Yet it held a depth that pierced through the layers of his intellect. He had always believed truth must be tested, proven, analyzed. But what if some truths could never be measured that way? What if some truths were meant to be felt, not calculated? He remained silent for a long while, then finally whispered, "I can't answer that right now." Milena nodded calmly. "That's okay, Doctor. But I believe that if you truly seek the truth, God will show it to you." There was something about those words that gave Dr. Eberardo peace. For the first time in his life, he felt he didn't need to rush toward an answer. Perhaps, he just needed to feel his way there. The students began to rise, one by one. Some quietly shook Milena's hand. Others gave their professor a long, thoughtful look before leaving. One male student approached Dr. Eberardo and said gently, "Professor, you've always taught us to think critically. But today, I realize that critical thinking isn't just about questioning everything. It's also about being open to truths that are greater than us." Dr. Eberardo nodded slowly. "You're right. Perhaps I spent so much time teaching skepticism that I forgot that true wisdom lies not only in questioning, but also in accepting when the truth finally comes." Milena stood and walked slowly toward the door. Before stepping out, she turned around and said in a soft voice, "Thank you, Doctor, for giving me the chance to speak. I hope, someday, we'll meet again, in a more beautiful state." Dr. Eberardo looked at her, his heart moved. His voice was softer now, more human than academic. "Thank you, Milena." The classroom door closed. The debate had ended. But something far greater had just begun. In the silence that followed, everyone present could feel it. This hadn't been a simple exchange of arguments. This had been a journey, a real one. A journey of a man who had spent his life searching for truth through logic and intellect, only to discover that some truths can only be found through the heart. Dr. Eberardo represented many in this world, not bad people, not faithless people, but people who had not yet found the truth. And our job is not to force them, not to argue them into belief, but simply to show them the light, and let them choose to follow it. Because in the end, the truth has its own way of reaching a heart that is ready. Dear friends, this story teaches us that the journey to truth is not always easy. But if we keep our minds and hearts open, Allah will surely guide us toward His light. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so that more people can take inspiration and wisdom from it. Until we meet again in another inspiring story,